Hi, thank you so much for coming to our fire prevention informational here. It's geared towards Loomis. A little bit about myself. My name is Jolie Goularte. I'm with the Goularte Group and Nixadic Sotheby's. I wanted to do this for selfish reasons. After seeing the LA fire, I decided to check with my neighbors, and I live in Clover Valley, and see about getting a fire informational together for all of us, because if my neighbor doesn't take care of their yard, my house can go. And so I wanted to make sure that my neighbors would take care and mitigate their homes. We do a lot of burns, and we just took out, we had lost 5 oaks last year, which took care of a lot of our trees. But I wanted to make sure that everybody was prepared. And because we're in Clover Valley, Loomis is right there. As a matter of fact, my utilities are Loomis. So fire has no city limits. It doesn't have boundaries. And so we do a lot of events here in Loomis. We did the Holiday Miracle Program. My daughter over there, Brianna, she is my partner. And if any of you were here during Christmas, during the tree lighting, the Holiday Miracle Program, and wrapping the gifts, that was our thing. So we do a lot of things here in Loomis, and I thought it was just fitting to invite or see if South Placer Fire was interested in doing a program here as well. And we met with Division Chief in Golia. Thank you. I got it. And they were thrilled. And they had an influx of calls because of the LA fires. And it was actually his idea to include Sheriff's Department, and also to include UC Davis and PCWA. So I made calls, and they were all very excited to join us. And I'm excited to have this program. We're going to go ahead and first hear from Jeff Ngolia, and then we're going to talk to Placer Sheriff's Department, which is Lieutenant Commander Doolittle. Then Andy Fecco, who is a GM of PCWA. He's going to talk about our water sources here, especially in comparison of LA. And then, of course, we have University of California Master Gardeners Program. And this is Kevin Mariani, correct? Marini. Okay, there we go. See, I'm Italian, so everything's got some kind of Italian flair. Excellent. Okay, thank you very much. Then we have a special speaker at the end. You're going to be excited about that. So go ahead, Jeff.
Thanks, Julie. I appreciate you getting this group together. Like she said, she did come and meet with us and said, hey, I think it'd be a good time to maybe talk to the community, kind of maybe calm some of the fears, or just kind of give you an idea of what we can do, and then also what you can do as a community to prepare your own property in the event of a wildfire situation. So appreciate everyone coming out tonight. So I'm going to start this presentation with a question. We're ready. Are you? We're going to talk a little bit. If you're sitting there thinking, I'm not sure if I'm ready, or I don't know if I'm ready, or I'm not ready, hopefully tonight we're going to give you some tips, some education, some ways that you can be ready. So by the end of my presentation, if I ask you that same question, you can have a little bit better answer. All right. We are going to open this up for questions at the very end. So kind of keep that in mind as I'm going through my presentation. If something comes to mind, just kind of hold on to it. We will answer questions at the end. The other thing is I'm going to hit you with a lot of information. My presentation is about 30 minutes, and I do cover a lot of ground within that 30 minutes. At first, you're going to remember everything I say, and then it's going to get tough. You're going to be going, wait a second, defensible space, zone 2, how many feet is that supposed to be away from the house? And zone 0 is this, and you're going to get a little bit confused. Don't worry about it. Just take a deep breath, relax. We have these beautiful flyers that are on the back table. They're provided by our friends from Firewise. Within this flyer is everything I'm going to tell you tonight. Talks a lot about defensible space, has all the facts and figures and everything that I'm going to go over tonight. So just relax, listen to the presentation, take one of these home with you, and then you can use this as a reference along with several other things. There's also a checklist out there that Julia has provided, and that has some great tips as you go through to see if your property meets those requirements. So just relax and enjoy the presentation. All right. So focusing tonight on defensible space and home hardening. These are some terms that you may have been familiar with because obviously they've been in the news quite a bit. One of the things I'd like to kind of start with the presentation on is obviously we're all very concerned because we saw what happened down in Los Angeles. I would never want to take away from what occurred down there, but I do want to caution you that we have a different situation up here. At the time of the Palisades fire, I did a quick check to see what the rain totals were for the Los Angeles area, and they had accumulated a whopping ½ inch of rain in the 24-25 winter season. I ran our rain totals and we were sitting at 18 inches. So big difference between the two areas. If you look around our area, obviously everything's nice and green. This is a particularly safe time for our community. I'm not saying that something couldn't happen because Lord knows anything is possible and that's the business that I'm in. I'm just saying that as we look at this, just understand that Northern California and Southern California, it's not apples to apples. It's a little bit different. And the situation that they had down there was a very dry situation. It was fueled by hurricane force winds, two things that contributed greatly to the damage that occurred. Again, not saying that can't occur here, but the chances are far less likely. All right, that being said, we're going to talk a little bit about, there we go. We're going to talk a little bit about fire dynamics, pretty basic stuff, but I just want to go over that because it will come into play as we go throughout the presentation. We're going to talk about a term called WUI, which you may have heard of, kind of a funny sounding word, but we'll define that. We're going to talk about wildland defensible space, how you can create that with your own home. We're going to talk about how to make a property what we call Firewise. And then we're going to finish it off with some information on home hardening. All right, so fire dynamics, how fire works. Basically, for a fire to occur, we need a fuel source and a heat source. If you want to be fire safe, you just keep your fuel source over here, you keep your heat source over here. As long as the two don't meet, we won't have a fire, right? Fuel and heat are what's needed to cause fire spread. That's kind of the basics of fire dynamics. And what we're going to talk about tonight is we want to interrupt that chain of progression. There's a nice little visual there of some matches, and you can see the fires clearly jumping from one match to another. With defensible space and home hardening, we want to put a break in between those matches so we stop that progression of the fire and keep your home safe. So that's kind of the dynamics of fire. We're going to talk about this a little bit more as we go on, but keep in mind, you need fuel and you need heat to have a fire. And what we want to do is to interrupt that, okay? Let's see, I get lucky. There we go. All right, WUI. So WUI, funny sounding word that just basically is an acronym for Wildland Urban Interface. What that means, it's a term that is well recognized in our industry as well as the building department. That is where modern civilization meets wildland. You take a look around Loomis, Granite Bay is also under my jurisdiction. That pretty much describes the entire area, right? Or at least 90% of it. It's the fastest growing land use in the United States since 1990. Of all the new WUI areas, 97% are for housing. So it's pretty specific to where people want to live. It makes up 10% of land use within the United States, but it contains 40% of the homes. So it's pretty large. And unsurprisingly, California contains the highest number of WUI housing units within the country. Wildland defensible space. So I'm going to try to not read slides because there's nothing worse than when a speaker does that. But this particular one's a good definition. So I'm going to go ahead and read it to you. So a defensible space is an area, either natural or man-made, where material capable of allowing a fire to spread unchecked has been treated, cleared, or modified to slow the rate and intensity of an advancing wildfire and to create an area for fire suppression operations to occur. Back to our discussion on fire dynamics, it's interrupting that chain. So excellent visual representation of a home that survived a significant wildland event. We're going to break this down a little bit further and kind of look at why this particular home survived when everything around it burned. Looking at the home itself, you can see the roof is clear. We don't have any dead vegetation, no pine needles or branches or leaves on the roof. Going around the perimeter of the lot, we see kind of in this area, we've got some low-growing shrubs, some fire-resistant shrubs. The landscape is kept nice and green. Green plants have a much harder time to burning than obviously dead or dry ones. We've got some great hardscapes around the home itself. We've got some concrete, some masonry work right up against the house, which is very important. We also have good separation on the trees. They're not all right up against each other, and I don't see any branches growing over the home. And then selfishly, from my standpoint, I have a nice wide driveway with a great turnaround at the end. So I can get a fire engine in there very easily, and I can also get it out in the event that I need to leave. And so those are all things that have worked together and contributed to the survival of this house. And that's what we're looking to give you that knowledge so that if we ever have a tragic event such as this, your home can look this way. Come on now, there we go. All right, so key points in maintaining a defensible space. We're going to define that defensible space. It's made up of 3 zones. Think of it as 3 rings around your house that go out from there. We're going to talk about breaking up landscaping. I think Kevin probably agree with that too. We can give you some tips on that. We want to eliminate ladder fuels. We'll discuss what that is and how that can be done. We want to keep things lean, clean, and green. Then, when we get that defensible space, we want to also maintain it. We're going to look at our roof. Emergency water supplies we'll discuss for a few minutes, and then we'll end with fireproof signs and access. All right, so defensible space broken into 3 zones. We have zone 0, which is 0 to 5 feet out from the home. Zone 1, which is 5 to 30 feet, and zone 2, which is 30 to 100 feet. Those are the areas that we're going to concentrate on. That's the most important when it comes to defensible space. Now, keep in mind as I go over these things, not every one of these items is going to be applicable to each and every one of your homes or your property. This is an ideal situation. If we were going to create the perfect defensible space, we were going to execute it properly, these are the things that it would need. You may be able to do all of them within your space. You may only be able to do part of them. Whatever you can do will help you. It's better than nothing. But don't stress out if you can't do all of them, because this is kind of an ideal situation. Make sense? All right. So zone 0 is named zone 0 because it's a reminder that we want 0 combustibles within that first 5 feet up against the house. So as we've had, unfortunately, more and more wildfires in California, we've studied them and we've learned what causes that fire to spread quickly and go from the wildland into a home. Predominantly, it centers around that zone 0. People tend to have chips or bark around that first 5 feet of their house. They put some plants and shrubs in there. They may be doing well, they may be dying. When a home is subjected to a wildfire situation, embers are blown against the house. Those embers then fall into the chips catch on fire, the shrubs catch on fire, it goes onto the siding, and we're off to the races. So we want to keep that area clear of any combustible material. Hardscapes like gravel, pavers, non-combustible mulch, things like that are good things to think about right in that first 5 feet against your home. We want to remove any dead vegetation. That's kind of an obvious one. You don't want to have dead plants right next to your house. That could be catastrophic as well. We want to remove branches from growing over the house or anywhere near within 10 feet of a chimney. Obviously, if we've got fires this time of year, we don't want any embers going into those trees. We want to limit our combustible items that we place on top of decks. That can be harmful as well. And then we want to relocate firewood stacked against the house to zone 2 away from the house. Now, of course, it's very convenient to have firewood right outside your door. You go out there, you grab a couple pieces, put it in your fireplace. But think back to the beginning of our discussion. What is that? That's a fuel source. Now all you need is a heat source, and we're gonna have a nice good fire because we've got all that firewood stacked right against the house. So the recommendation is to move that out to zone 2 and get a little bit of separation between it and the home. We want to replace combustible fencing. The last 5 or 10 feet of combustible fencing that's up against the house, we want to look at maybe some alternative materials so that it's not combustible. Fire travels along a pathway, and if we put it right up against the house, it can start at the backyard and move its way right into the home. We're going to consider relocating garbage cans or recycle containers, boats and RVs, all out of that zone 0 as well. Again, we want to eliminate those fuel sources from being close to the house. All right, zone 1 extends from 5 feet to 30 feet out. Again, we want to move any kind of dead vegetation that's in that area. We want to trim our trees, and ideally, we want about a 10-foot separation between trees. Again, this might not be possible on your property. Keep that in mind. That's kind of a rule of thumb. We want to remove or prune flammable plants and shrubs that are within 5 or 10 feet of a window. Sometimes that radiant heat can transfer into the house and get things going inside the house, so we want to remove those or prune them back if we can. We want to pay particular attention to items around or underneath decks. That can be particularly problematic. And we want to create a separation between our vegetation. We don't want a large block of vegetation all growing right up next to the house or on the house. So that's in that zone 1. Zone 2 then extends out further 30 to 100 feet. So with that, we'd have a complete, kind of 100 foot of defensible space around the house. In that area, we want to concentrate on our annual grasses and weeds. Ideally, we want to keep those to a height of about 4 inches. What happens when you have grasses and weeds that are down at that level, if they are to catch fire when it's dried out in the summertime, it's a very slow moving fire. That enables us to get there quickly, extinguish the fire before it gets too big. If we're dealing with grasses that are 12, 18, 24 inches tall, they burn quickly and they move quickly. So that makes it particularly challenging. So those grasses are very important to keep those mowed down. And there's always a balancing act. People try to mow as late in the season as they can because they don't want to do it twice. I don't blame them, especially if you have a large property. However, I can tell you in the 5 years that I've been here with South Placer directly, each year we have several fires that occur right at the end of May, beginning of June, as people are trying to mow their property. So keep that in mind. It's, I would say, bite the bullet, mow it twice if you have to, rather than take a chance waiting till the very end when things are dried out. Let's see, create some horizontal space between shrubs and trees. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Again, in this area, when we remove any kind of leaves, twigs, bark, cones, or any down trees that are in this area, just get those away, get those fuel sources out of there. And if you do have an exposed wood pile, the recommendation is to actually create bare dirt perimeter around that wood pile out about a 10-foot radius. All right, so breaking things up. I think, like I said, Kevin, when he talks about landscaping, we'll have some more information on this. But again, we just don't want to see large blocks of vegetation. If you can put some hardscapes between there, some rocks, some brick, and kind of have sections of vegetation, that seems to be helpful, because if that vegetation is to catch on fire, maybe we have a small little area on fire rather than a larger area. A smaller fuel load means we have a smaller fire, means it's much easier to contain, and it spreads slower as well. Ladder fuels, you heard me mention that term. So this is an excellent kind of visual representation of a ladder fuel. What that means basically is we have a low ground fire that occurs maybe in the grass area, and then as it gets near trees and things that are taller, it just jumps up to them. And it's something that obviously causes a fire to grow in intensity and puts homes at risk. This is another good graphic on that. This is the situation that we're trying to avoid. We don't want to have a ton of vegetation right up against a house. You can see very easily that a grass fire can work its way into the ground, the shrubs, into the tree canopy, and then right into the house. We don't want to provide that pathway. Again, we want to take that fuel source and get it away from the heat source, right? Or at least as away from the home as far as possible. Horizontal clearances, so recommendations are on flat land, whatever a shrub or a bush, about 2 times the height of that shrub should be the separation between them, and about 10 feet between trees. Again, this might not be possible on your property. These are the recommendations. Once we start to get any kind of slope, a moderate slope between 20 and 40%, those numbers double. And then once we get to a little more steeper slope of 40% or more, those numbers triple. Now, the reason that the distances become greater as the slope becomes higher is because fire is one of the few things that actually travels quicker uphill than it does on flat ground or on downhill. The winds and everything get behind it, and it moves very rapidly uphill as opposed to being on flat land. There we go. Vertical clearance recommendation is 6 feet below for trees, to prune them up 6 feet off the ground. It's another good representation of kind of a ladder fuel situation that we're trying to avoid. And then if there's a shrub or a bush underneath your tree, they're saying about 3 times the height of that shrub or bush is what they recommend to the bottom of the tree, as long as it's not less than 6 feet. Lean, clean, and green. Pretty self-explanatory. You guys could probably figure it out even without the slide, but it's a great representation of kind of a ideal backyard. Lean is when we have small amounts of flammable vegetation. Clean, obviously, we don't want to have any kind of accumulation of dead vegetation or debris or trash or things of that nature. And then green. Again, green plants are much harder to burn than dead ones. So this picture is kind of a, again, ideal situation that not all of us can attain, but it is very fire safe. So once we have a defensible space, it's important that that space is maintained. A lot of times homeowners, property owners make the mistake of working hard to create a defensible space, to get it all dialed in, and they think that they're done. Well, unfortunately, as we know, things grow back. And if you're not on top of it and checking it, at least on an annual basis, you can lose all that hard work that you put into it. So we recommend it's checked annually. And our recommendation is that you do it in the spring, obviously getting your property ready for the warm summer months that are ahead. All right, going on to roofs. Obviously, it's going to be kind of a key area when it comes to fire safety and fire spread. When we remove any kind of buildup, you can see from those 2 slides that needles and things like that tend to accumulate in the valleys and on the edge, and then leaves tend to accumulate in the gutters. That's all fuel. We don't want to put that fuel right up against our house. When we have a wildfire situation, we have embers that are blowing well ahead of the fire, and we don't want the embers to land into that fuel and get that going. So it's important that those are removed and taken care of. We would recommend that your roof is inspected twice a year. Again, spring would be the most important time. It's also a good idea to inspect it again in the fall and then remove any kind of deadfall that you see up there. Also installing spark arresters on your fireplace. I'd be surprised if anybody doesn't have one of those, but if you don't, it's important so we don't get any embers coming out of your chimney that would land into this and cause a fire. Emergency water supplies. So a lot of times we get approached, a homeowner or property owner says, hey, I want to put in a 1,000-gallon tank. That way, if my property's on fire, you guys have water. And we would love that. We're appreciative of that. Keep in mind, though, we do have the ability to pull water, draft water out of a swimming pool or out of a pond. So if you have either of those on your property, you've already provided us with an emergency water supply, which is great. If you do want to add an above ground or below ground tank, all that we ask is that you come and meet with us prior to purchasing and installing that. There's some pretty specific things that we will need to utilize one of those. One of them being the piping and the type of threads that are on that pipe so that we can hook up to it. We'd also need some pretty bold signage that we could see, because we want to make sure our guys know at 2 in the morning when they're responding and this tank's out here, we want them to know what it is. So there's going to have to be some signage on there. And then also location on the property. We want to make sure it's next to a driveway or a place where we can drive up and actually access it. So if it's something that you're ever interested in, please come and talk to us ahead of time. We wouldn't want somebody to spend a bunch of money for something that we can't use. Keep in mind, we do bring our own water supply with us, 750 gallons in an engine, which sounds like a lot, but we can blow through that in about 2 minutes if we really want to, so it doesn't last very long. We also do have a 5,000-gallon water tender that we bring on in a fire situation if it's available to us. And then we do have some water there, and 5,000 gallons obviously lasts a little bit longer if we're in an area where there's no hydrants, but we try our best to come self-sufficient, right? Signs and access. So modern homes are being built right now. The access requirement is that driveways are a minimum of 12 feet wide. If the driveway is less or greater than 300 feet in length, we require a turnaround for our fire engine at the back of the driveway. If you're not living in a modern home that was just built in the last few years, you don't have that situation, and you may not be able to put anything like that in. And that's okay. But just keep in mind that that's kind of the facts and figures that we've come up with. That's an ideal situation. The easier it is for us to get into your property and also to get out of it, the more likely we are to make it a defensible stop at your home. Another thing to consider is we need 15 feet of vertical clearance. This is an area that is unfortunately neglected quite a bit on roadways and driveways within our jurisdiction, because most of you here are driving cars and SUVs. There's nowhere near that height. But when a fire engine comes through, we need that extra clearance so that we can get through. So an oak branch or something like that that's sitting at the 12-foot level can delay us considerably or even prevent us from getting to a property. This has ramifications well beyond wildfire situations. You may be having a house fire, you may be having a medical event. If we can't get an engine to you, or we have to divert around low vertical clearance, it just delays in getting to you and providing help. So as you're going through your driveways and roadways, take a look up, see what's going on up there, and try to give us that 15-foot clearance. Signage is important too. Addressing can be very challenging sometimes in our jurisdiction. So make sure the bigger, bolder, and more evident your address is, the better our chances are of finding you. We obviously have computers on the engine. We use Google Maps and different things that are pretty good at getting us to where we need to be. We have a lot of parcels. We have a lot of old driveways and roadways and kind of funky things within our jurisdiction. So addressing is important. And then keep in mind, if it's on a non-combustible signage, that's going to be better. If we have a fire situation, your address burns up. It's kind of hard for us to see, right? So non-combustible is the way to go when it comes to that. If all this is done properly, we create a survivable space. That's what we're looking to do, impart this knowledge onto you that you can make a home survivable all on its own without any intervention from us. I wish that I could stand up here and tell you that we can supply firefighters and a fire engine to every single home in a wildfire event. But you guys know just as well as I do, it's not possible. We'll do the best we can. We'll try to save the homes that we can save, but we're not going to be able to be everywhere at once. If you do this properly, you can create your own survivable space that can make it in a fire situation. All right. So a couple years ago in Sacramento at their training center for Sacramento Fire, they built two structures. They built one with fire-resistant material, and they built another that was kind of more traditional wooden material. So we got the one on the left, one on the right. One on the left has typical landscaping, has bark up against the home, has some trees and some brush. It's got a wooden fence. One on the right, fire resistant material on the exterior and the roof, and it has a non-combustible fence, and it had the zone 0, the 5 foot of defensible space. They then put some embers into this area and got things going. And of course, the bark ignited on the home on the left. The one on the right is kind of sitting there. Everything was okay. And then they put fans on it to simulate a wildfire situation. And within a few minutes, the structure on the left is on the ground. The structure on the right remains intact. So I found this on YouTube. I'm sure you guys can too. It's a pretty dramatic representation of how important a defensible space is. It's not going to be 100% viable all the time, but it certainly is going to help. So when you think about this defensible spaces, like I said, you may or may not be able to do all of this on your own property. Anything you can do is better than nothing. And no matter how hard you try, we still might lose houses. There's just so much unknown that happens. We do the best we can as a fire agency to help you. You can do the best you can on defensible space, but there's just, nature has its way of doing things. And sometimes, we can't avoid it, but these are things that are definitely better than nothing, and they can make a significant difference. So home hardening, and thank you guys for being patient. Sorry, a lot of information to cover. Key areas that we concentrate on home hardening. Basically, home hardening is like it sounds. We're making our home hard to burn, right? We don't want to make it easy and make it hard. The areas that we concentrate on, and these are some, as I'm going through this, just kind of think of ones maybe applicable to your situation. We start at the top. We've got our roofs, gutters, eaves. We've got vents, siding on the house, skylights, windows, decks, of course, garages, and fences. I'm going to run through these kind of quickly. I could literally spend probably an hour or two on each subject. And though I'm sure you guys would be interested for the first hour, maybe by hour 2, 3, 4, we get to 3 in the morning, you're not going to be so interested anymore. So we won't subject you to too much punishment. Roofs. If anybody's got a wood shake roof in our presentation tonight, do something about it, please. First off, I'd be surprised if your insurance company will carry you with a wood shake roof. But if you do have that, obviously we want to get that replaced with a Class A roof. But keep in mind too that a lot of times metal roofs and things like that, like the picture on the left, it'll still have some gaps within there. So those gaps need to either be filled or they need to be covered. Tile roofs kind of have that same thing. And think about our wildfire situation. We've got embers blowing. We don't want embers to have the ability to go into a little gap and sit there and kind of fester and burn, because that can get the roof going. On a Class B or C rated roof, which would be like your composition tiles, your tar tiles, we want to make sure that we have an additional fire resistant barrier underneath those tiles, and then roof sheathing as well. That's going to keep anything that would happen on the roof on it rather than into your attic space. And you can do research on more of these. Google obviously is a wealth of knowledge. So if you see something that kind of sparks something in your mind, you can go back and kind of check this out. And there's a lot of information on this. Roof edges. So we saw in that one video that we've got an accumulation sometimes of vegetation, leaves, pine needles, stuff like that. They tend to accumulate along the edges of a roof. So one of the recommendations is that the vertical part of your roof, if you have a home that's similar to this, that meets up with the actual roof, the siding part, a kind of cost-effective way that you can improve the ability of your house to survive in a wildfire situation is to replace that with some sort of non-combustible siding, cement siding or something of that nature. That way, in theory, if there's a fire on that smaller roof, it's not going to spread to the siding that's next to it. You can also put some metal flashing down. They recommend about 6 inches high that goes against the siding, and it would also help kind of keep a fire in check if there was a fire to occur on that lower roof. So just something to think about as a simple way to kind of help improve your home's chances of survivability. Gutter guards, I think we all are pretty familiar with those. The last 10 or 20 years, those have become very popular. They're a great tool when it comes to keeping a home safe. You see on the left, obviously, it does a good job of keeping the debris out of the gutter. The example on the right, if I was going to build a campfire, that's all the stuff I would gather, right? So now it's all sitting in somebody's gutter, just waiting to go. And the problem with that is once we get embers in that area, and once we ignite those leaves and twigs and dry dried stuff in there, you can see it can work its way right in underneath those composition roof tiles and get the roof going. So we want to make sure that those gutters are cleaned. That can be a challenge, but if you have a situation where it's tough, I would recommend putting the gutter guards on. All right, eaves. So the example on the left is kind of old school building. Your eave is the area where your roof kind of goes over the side of your house. Some of you may have this situation at home. It's the way homes used to be built. One thing that we've learned over time is if we have embers blowing, you're going to have those embers blow right underneath those eaves. And you see those holes in there, those go right to the attic space, which was great for providing venting to the attic, but it's also an excellent path for an ember to go through and get an attic on fire. Modern day construction covers those eaves and puts venting in that is horizontal venting rather than vertical venting. For a fire to get through that vent, it would actually have to go underneath the eave, up, over, and into your attic space. It's not going to happen, or shouldn't anyhow. I shouldn't say not, it shouldn't. Very difficult. The more difficult it is, the less likely it is, right? So it's another easy fix. You can hire a contractor to come out and cover up those eaves if you have that old school design. You can also get some wire mesh material to cover up the holes, and so that you don't have that ability for an ember to go right up into your attic space. So kind of another thought. Venting is probably one of the simplest and least expensive. I'm not saying it's cheap, but it's least expensive things that you can do to improve your home, especially if you live in an older home. Venting is generally seen in two places. It's going to be up underneath those eaves like that because it's an attic vent, or up near the roof line. And then if you're on a raised foundation, you're going to have venting that's going to be along the lower edges of your house to provide airflow underneath the house. Back in the day, they used to do 1/4 inch or bigger, just kind of a wire mesh that went over those vents to keep rodents and stuff from coming into that area. Well, what we've discovered, blowing embers hit that vent, go right through, right into your attic space or right into the area underneath your home and get the home going and get it caught on fire. So replacing that venting with smaller openings, nothing more than 1/8 of an inch, makes a big difference. There's a company actually right over here on King Road and Swetzer, that large kind of yellowish building. They produce a product. It's called Vulcan venting. So think Vulcan like Spock on Star Trek, right? So you can look them up online. They don't sell it there, but they make it there. And Vulcan venting has small openings on their vents, and then what they do is they stack several layers of vents in line with each other, and then they stagger the openings. So now, instead of an ember going all the way through and right into your attic space or underneath your home, the ember has to go through, turn, go through, turn. Again, it's very unlikely that would happen. So it's a simple improvement. And if you do make that improvement on your home, I'd recommend, if you want to take the chance of calling your insurance agent and talking with them, say, hey, we did improve our venting, because sometimes they will give you a break on your insurance if you upgrade that venting. So we have had that happen too. Back to siding, we talked a little bit about it in the upper levels. Obviously, it's very beneficial if you can do it on the lower level too, in combination with our Zone 0 non-combustible area that provides a kind of a really good fire safe barrier, especially if you have detached garage or a shed that's within 10, 20, 30 feet of your house. If you can afford to upgrade the siding in that area, that's going to prevent any kind of radiant heat from igniting your home in a fire situation. Skylights tend to collect debris. So if you have skylights on your roof, just when you're up there inspecting your roof, just make sure you're cleaning any debris from around your skylights. Plastic skylights tend to melt in a fire situation, allow fire to get in. So glass is a much better option, although it's much harder to get. And then kind of this goes without saying, but since it shows on the slide, I'll go there anyway. If you're away from your home and you have a vent that opens up on your skylight, don't leave it open just in case something bad happens. Close that vent. We don't want to give fire an easy way to get into your home, right? Window technology's come a long way. Older homes had single pane windows. With single pane windows, we learned that they're very bad at keeping out radiant heat from inside the home. So, and they're also very bad about keeping warm energy or cool energy inside the home. So modern homes have dual pane windows. Those work a lot better to keep radiant heat from coming outside of the home into the home in a fire situation. They also have tempered glass, which means that they don't break. Old windows from the 60s, 70s, and 80s, they would actually break. And then, of course, you've got an open window allowing fire to come in. Tempered glass cracks And so it'll still break, but it doesn't come apart. And so you still have that good fire barrier. So that's another great upgrade that you could do on an older home to help make it a little bit safer. All right, decks. So decks to roofs, I would say decks, they're probably neck and neck on which is the most dangerous when it comes to fire spread. Decks are typically made out of wood. It's a large surface area. Embers love to collect on those decks or underneath the decks. And so if you do have a large wooden deck, they're beautiful, but you may want to think about replacing it with a composite material. So by composite, we mean like a Trex or something like that. It's actually a plastic material that won't burn. You can afford to do that and replace the whole deck. You can still have the beauty of a deck, but without the risk involved with it. If you do have a raised deck like the one in the picture here, you do want to check underneath there every once in a while and make sure that there's no dead vegetation or any debris that's collected underneath there. So obviously in a fire situation, embers are going to blow under there and get that stuff going. If you can't afford to replace the whole deck, the slide on the right kind of shows there is metal flashing that you can put in between where the deck connects with the house and your siding. That's a little bit more cost effective. I don't know if it'll be 100% effective in a fire situation, but it would help. And so you could look at doing something like that. Another recommendation they have is to take the 1 or 2 boards that are closest to the house and replace them with composite decking or some sort of non-combustible material. In a slow-moving fire that's going across a deck, the thought is once it reaches that composite material, it's going to stop burning because, again, we're pulling our fuel source away from our heat source, and then it won't get the house going as well. So those are just some things to consider when it comes to decking. Garages, we recommend that you treat them just like the residence. We want to have a good defensible space around a garage and follow kind of all the same parameters that we do for a house. With garages, the only other consideration is the gap that can be created between where the garage door meets the frame on the side. If you have any kind of gap in there, just make sure that you put some weather stripping or some sort of barrier in there so we don't have the ability for an ember to kind of go in sideways and get into your garage. Modern day garage openers, a lot of them come with battery backup, which is good. So if you're in a situation where all of a sudden you're quickly asked to evacuate, you need to get cars out of the garage, but the power's out, you can still do so. With a upgraded garage door opener. Keep in mind, though, we all know that that hook and that rope that's hanging from the garage door, you can simply pull on that and then manually open the door. All that we ask is if you do evacuate, you get cars out of a garage, when you leave, shut those garage doors, right? They're going to provide a little bit of a barrier. We don't leave them wide open in a place for embers to collect and get the contents of your garage going. So we want to make sure that those are closed. Chimneys, we discussed this a little bit. You need to make sure you have a spark arrestor, some sort of cover over your chimney, 3/8 to 1/2 inch at most on the openings on that, so we don't get embers that come out onto your roof. That does happen occasionally. There's also a recommendation on that metal flashing where the roof meets the chimney. You can see that little gray spot down there at the base of the chimney, and that kind of gives you a little bit of a barrier if there was a fire on the roof that's not spreading to your siding. And then number one most important thing, properly dispose of your ashes. Every year that I've been in the fire service, and there's been 25 of them, I've had at least one fire that's originated from people putting ashes into a trash can. What happens is, even though a lot of times it may have been 2 or 3 days since they had a fire in the fireplace, those ashes can still be hot in the center. And when you put them into a trash can filled with combustible trash, a lot of times they ignite. Most of us, I would say in this room, probably follow a practice of keeping the trash can up against the house. Well, when a trash can burns next to a house, you can see what's going to happen. We're going to put that fuel source and heat source right next to each other. Not good. One thing that I've done, just based on that experience and what I've seen, is if I clean out my fireplace, I put it into a non-combustible metal container, I get it away from my house, and then on the night when I put my trash cans out to be collected, I dump the ashes into the trash can at that time. Worst case scenario for me is that I wake up to a melted trash can next to my sidewalk, which I'll take instead of having it catch fire next to my house. So just something to consider when it comes to that. It's pretty common knowledge. I don't think I'm saying anything that would be new to anybody here, but you'd be surprised every year that this happens, and it's tragic. All right, we're going to kind of finish this up with fences. So we talked a little bit about that. You remember the graphic at the very beginning when we talked about fuel sources and heat sources. We had those matches. Well, if you look at the fence boards, kind of mimic those matches, right? Fire has a tendency to follow the fence line. When we have a wildfire situation out in the field, reaches a fence, And those fences connect with the house. Guess what? We've created a path of travel right to our home where we don't want it to be. So keeping in mind, we want to keep the fuel source away from the heat source. A recommendation is to take that last 5 or 10 feet of fencing and put a non-combustible fence in place, whether that be an iron fence or composite material or something of that nature. That way, a fire gets to that and ends and doesn't progress all the way into your home. Make sense? Also, too, we want to make sure we check that fence line every once in a while, especially if you have a large property. Make sure there's no dead vegetation or any kind of debris that's blown up against that fence. Want to clear that out because that's just more fuel load. And then lastly, if you do build a trellis or something decorative along your fence line, we just ask that that is kept away from the house, not right up against the house, because again, we're increasing that fuel load right next to the house. And also those tend to have the ability to collect debris or dead vegetation. So if we do everything right and Mother Nature smiles upon us, right? Everything is good and we have a defensible space, we've hardened our home, and we're lucky, and you get a great fire department like South Placer Fire District that comes out and protects your place. We can avoid this. This is not what we want. I don't want anybody to have to go through this. This is tragic. I run our investigations division and I have to see the aftermath of this all the time. And it breaks my heart to see this situation and people losing their home and all their possessions. This is the last thing you as a homeowner or property owner want to see, and it's the last thing we in the fire district want to see. What we'd like to see instead, something like this. We still had a tragic event, right? We still had a big fire around this place, but check it out. It made it through. And that's what we're trying to at least impart a little bit of knowledge to you so that your property, your home can look like this if there's a catastrophic event in our area. So I end this with the same question I asked at the beginning. We're ready. We're going to prepare hard. We're going to exercise. We're going to hydrate. The summer months come. We're very aggressive. We know this is the biggest risk to our community. So we're very aggressive when we have a wildfire. We don't want it to get out of control. So we're ready. Are you? Well, hopefully, with the knowledge you've got, I appreciate the honesty. With the knowledge you've gotten tonight, hopefully you're a little more ready than you were in the past. So thank you all for your attention. I know it's a lot of information. Keep in mind that handout's going to go over a lot of the stuff I said. And then if you ever have any questions, you can obviously contact our fire district and we'd be happy to help you any further. So thank you.
Okay, and we're going to have Lieutenant Commander Doolittle come up and talk about evac.
Kind of like I grew up in Loomis and Newcastle, so it's like being home again. And we have a great relationship with all of our fire partners, including South Placer. When there's a big critical incident, a fire, you'll hear, unified command. So when there's a critical incident, a critical fire, we will mirror up with fire and basically be attached at the hip. They're running the fire side, we're running the law side, but everything's done in conjunction with one another through teamwork.
And it works great, by the way.
Absolutely.
It really does.
It's come a long way. So I've been here for almost coming up on 23 years, and the progression of the relationships with fire and law enforcement has increased significantly.
Yes.
It's much more efficient than it's ever been before, and it's getting better. I'll get into that in a second. You can see there's a map of the county right there. We have multiple offices, but we have 2 main offices right now. Well, more than that, we have substations, but we have Tahoe office, which is East Slope, and we have the Auburn office, which is West Slope. West Slope also includes Loomis, our substation, our Colfax substation, and our Forest Hill Service Center. When there is a critical incident, a significant fire, we can pull from the Tahoe down to here. They can pull us up there. But then we also have all these other resources for the law enforcement side. Auburn PD, Roseville PD, Rockland PD. Everybody comes together. We all have one goal, and that's to save people, help fire save houses, and make sure everybody's safe. So one of the things we do in the county, and we invite other law enforcement agencies, we work with CAL FIRE, South Placer Fire, any law enforcement or fire agency, is we train every year, and we have multiple sessions. So we will do real-time scenario training. We have dispatchers out there, we have deputies, we have paramedics, we have fire personnel, and we train on unified command so that when it's game time, we're all ready to go. Very successful. I participated in it, and I don't even know how many. It's a mandatory training for all of our supervisors, our lieutenants, and there's multiple sessions. We have an East Slope, a Tahoe training session, and we have a West Slope. And again, it's every year. So we practice scenarios, and we invite anybody that wants to attend in the region because we're all going to have to work together. This is several years old. We did this maybe within the last 5 to 7 years where it's becoming a common practice. And it really has upped our game when it comes to real life situations. It's much more efficient. And we build those networking relationships to where we get to know each other pretty well and leads to a much more effective scenario. Has anybody signed up for Plaster Alert? Awesome. So these are our notifications. You can see we got a bunch up there. Anybody big in social media? Right? Exactly. So from the sheriff's office, we put out information about evacuations or other critical incidents. We're doing it in conjunction with the fire department. But we use social media, whether it be Twitter, Snapchat, Facebook. We also have the Plaster Alert. If you have not signed up for Plaster Alert, you can go to the website and sign up. We can send, whether it be a fire, some other critical incident, we can basically draw this map on a computer, an outline of an area on a computer map, and it'll start calling people right away with an automated message. Whatever we say, this is an evacuation warning or mandatory evacuations. We just don't do that though. We also follow up with door to door. We will go and knock on everybody's door to let them know, what's going on and what we recommend. Has anybody heard the high-low siren? No, fairly new, last couple of years. Super annoying, but it gets the job done, right? Per policy and law, we're only allowed to use that siren for events like fires. We can't just use it for in a pursuit. So because they want people to know the difference, that if they hear that, oh, it's not the cops just chasing somebody, it's actually there's something going on to where we need to pay attention. We also have 211 Placer. People can call 211 and there's always somebody that answers the phone and can answer questions. And it's not just about fires, a whole bunch of different county services. But social media, if you don't have a social media account, the way to go, right? I know I'm not a big social media fan myself either, but it has, and that's the one advantage of it. Types of evacuations. Anybody know what the difference between evacuation warning and evacuation order is? A warning is to prepare you, to let you know the situation. What's that? Yeah, I mean, it's more of a warning like, hey, this is going to be a problem, potential problem. We recommend, you either leave or you shelter in place. Shelter in place meaning hunker down, make yourself safe. That's the first step. Evacuation order, we need everybody to leave. Now, we can't force you to leave. I can't kick open your door and grab you and take you out of your house. But what I would tell you is, if you don't leave and you go against the order, I'm probably not going to be able to come back to save you. So if you call, I might not be able to get back. That's why when we give those warnings or those orders, we want people to leave the area in a safe manner so that not everybody's rushing all at once and the roads get clogged. So pay attention to that. Inevitably, we always have people that I'm not leaving. Fire could be right across the street and they're not leaving. We hate to see that. We document it, but we can't come back sometimes, right? We get locked out. So you're really rolling the dice. So we always recommend to follow the instructions. Temporary evacuation point could be something like, it's temporary. It could be a church. It could be the fairgrounds. It could be some place where everybody in an area can congregate till we figure out where they're going to go next, right? And then an evac shelter usually is for overnight, fairgrounds, different setups with Red Cross, food, and so forth. Okay. So we already did the Are You Prepared stuff. Quite honestly, I bought an older house that I remodeled a few years ago. I never had gutter guards. I have them now. It's the greatest thing ever. I'm telling everybody about it. I don't have to get on my roof and keep cleaning the gutters out have my wife yell at me for making a mess. But I don't think anybody is ever 100% prepared. I try to be. Defensible space, gutter guards. We can always do better. And that's what, like our fire partners say, we want the same thing. So there's a website up here, Ready, Set, Go, readyforwildfire.org, has a lot of information. Other things we want you to have are like a go bag. Fire season, just have a bag with some toiletries and some spare clothes just in case, right? You can grab it and you can go. Have a plan. Think to yourself with your family. You remember when you were in elementary school, you'd always have a plan how to evacuate a house if there was a house fire? Think bigger picture, right? If there's a fire on Taylor Road, I live on King Road, where am I going to go if something happens? Know the area. We have GPS, but it's not always foolproof. Sometimes there's issues. So if you're new to an area, kind of research it, study it, know how to get out of the area. And that's one thing we see a lot, stay calm. We see people panic to where we see collisions, we see bottlenecks where people can't get out. We have to stay calm, and that usually happens by knowing your area and having a plan. We covered don't ignore the orders. I can't say that enough. If we say it's time to go, please go. The last thing we want to do is not be able to get to you to help you get out where we're locked out. That's horrible. And then assistance. By calling our dispatcher 911, if you're not home and you have a disabled family member that's stuck at home, we need to know that right away. Because we need to might have to go and help get somebody out, right? Pets, usually animal control, they have stand-up shelters, if you will, at the fairgrounds. So if you do get evacuated and you have dogs, but you can't take your dog to the hotel or no place for a dog to go, or horses, there's usually places around that'll be a temporary shelter for them. So you can see up here in the second picture, color-coded maps. So we have different software. We work with fire. They give a lot of direction with this about different fire zones. Fire and our branch, we work together for the evacuations. Fire says, hey, they give us all the information about the fire, right? They tell us fast spread, northeast direction. Okay, where do you think the evacuation warnings and orders are? And they help us facilitate that. And then we take that information and we run with it. We get the word out. All evacuation orders are going to be hard closures, meaning once you leave, you can't go back in, right? We will not let anybody in. The one exception to that is media. We can't stop the media from going. We can warn them, but they have a right to go. But if you leave your house and it's evacuation order, you try to go back in to get a radio or a TV or a sleeping bag. We're going to say no. All areas are going to have traffic control points, whether it be us, CHP, a local police department, state parks. Someone's going to be there to make sure that nobody's sneaking in. And then another thing people don't think about, we do roving looting patrols. Because we want to protect people, we also want to protect their property. So we will have deputies, CHP, state park, whoever, whatever law enforcement agencies there actually roving around in the area that's safe. Maybe it was already hit by the fire, hopefully not, to make sure that there's no looting. Because as you can imagine, that happens quite a bit. Fortunately, in our area, we are so aggressive with the looting patrols. It's not too bad of an area up here, but in Southern California, you hear about all the looting and everything. So a lot of people want to know about repopulation. How do you get home? Well, it's a decision that's made by unified command, but not just by fire and law enforcement. It's also going to be the building department, utilities, roads department. All these teams come together and we say, okay, is it good to go back? Everybody has to be in agreement. Once that happens, we start notifying people. Again, social media, whether it be Everbridge or the alert system, it's going to be conducted systematically. So whatever that looks at, depending on the region, we're not going to say, okay, all of Loomis, you're good to go back, because that's just going to be chaos, right? We're going to have zones that we're going to start repopulating. So, and everybody's going to know this area gets to repopulate, then this area, and we put that out. Very communicative. Repopulating versus fire behavior. If the team of everybody is not sure, we won't repopulate. Last thing we want is for people to go back home and then 6 hours later, hey, you got to leave again, right? So we are going to be certain as we can be with all the team players, that it's safe to go back. We don't want to put anybody in a bad spot. Man, I got the easy parts. Cool. Thank you.
Talk about our water resources.
Great, thank you. It's getting easier. These guys ahead of me, they do such a fabulous job. I take this really seriously. I've been evacuated from my home 3 times. And over the years, we've been Forest Hill for 25 years, and you just get evacuated every once in a while in Forest Hill. These guys do fabulous. We work with them on the utility business side, but also from my personal side. So So we got a lot of questions after LA and Palisades about water supply. We've been thinking about this really seriously since the King Fire and since Campfire and Paradise, and so we've done a lot of work on this. Just my sort of entry slide. We are really focused on serving our customers, whether that's at fire hydrants or at their homes or farms and businesses. There's really good news in Northern California. You live in a place that has really adequate water supplies. This is our two big reservoirs that you all, the citizens of Placer County, paid for, French Meadows and Hellhole Reservoir. There's 350,000 acre feet of storage in these two reservoirs high up on the mountain above Forest Hill. This is our water supply. We use only about a third of it every year. We have a whole nother source of water along the Highway 80 corridor that we all have access to as well. So if you look at this map, I just showed you our two big reservoirs there, French Meadows and Hellhole, sort of on the upper right. We also have access along the Highway 80 corridor to Lake Spalding, which is from the South Yuba River and the Bear River. And our canals, along with PG&E's, come down Highway 80. We treat that water along the way at water treatment plants. That water goes into our treated water system, which serves all of the hydrants in Placer County from Alta all the way out to as far as we serve in West Placer County, along with our partners at City of Roseville, City of Lincoln, San Juan Water, et cetera. So we all take fire service and fire hydrants really seriously, and they are plumbed into a really good water supply. And I can't emphasize this enough, that relies on gravity. Gravity's a good thing. If you've got water high up on the mountain and you need it at the bottom and you can run it by gravity that doesn't rely on pumps or power outages, it's good for everybody. So as we get into West Placer, this is hard for you to see, but I'll just represent to you that along Highway 80 corridor, not only do we have water treatment plants, but we have a large volume of water storage tanks along the way. And that's all hooked into the hydrant system that these guys, when they drive up to, need to be able to tap and keep running. So you heard the chief say 750 gallons goes pretty quick. We can produce in this system about 2 million gallons of water an hour and distribute it throughout the system. And what that means is that even if there's a big fire burning in Granite Bay, those hydrants are going to be charged. The downside is, and this is what we always tell people, is the temptation is to leave all your sprinklers running when you leave home. Please don't do that. And the reason is that when the chief pulls up in his truck and hooks into a hydrant and everyone's got their sprinklers on, even though I can make 2 million gallons of water a day, the pressure is going to be low, and it's going to be hard to fill their trucks, and it's going to be hard to run sprinklers inside homes, et cetera. And so it's really tempting, and my neighbors have done it as well. We really try to make sure people avoid running all their sprinklers. It's something we actually saw in the river fire in Colfax, where we had to go out with the sheriff's office and the fire department and turn whole streets off because there was so much water running out. And so just something to keep in mind. We really appreciate it if you would just not keep your sprinklers running, because then it hurts their ability to hook into it and put the actual fire out. Your sprinklers are just not going to do that much. I'm sorry. It's not going to help you in a big fire, especially as you get into the wildland urban interface. Let's talk about hydrants. We have a lot of hydrants, and it's hydrants are a cooperative effort. The way hydrants work is that when a new housing development gets built, oftentimes the developer or the builders will put in hydrants. They turn those over to us. We have cooperative arrangements with the fire districts. And then we've got different fire districts all throughout the county. Fire districts go out and test the hydrants, make sure there's adequate pressure, make sure they can turn all the valves on the hydrants. If a hydrant goes bad or someone crashes into it, which happens, we go out and change it as soon as we can. And so that's just a cooperative relationship that we have. We supply all the water and the hardware. These folks go out and test it and make sure it meets their specs. And if it doesn't, we go out and replace it. So the next map is busy. But I'm going to tell you why it's busy. It's because there's a lot of hydrants. And so this is Rockland, kind of on the left side of the screen. And you'll see up the upper corner is Whitney High School. And then you can see Highway 80 coming from sort of the middle of the screen on the bottom and going up to the top right. You can see the more densely populated an area, the more hydrants we're going to have. It's just a simple rule. As you get towards less densely populated areas, 5-10 acre parcels outside of Loomis, out towards Granite Bay, there's just less hydrants. That's the way it sort of is, because there's just less population. In a place like Rockland, master plan community, a lot of big developers, there's a fire hydrant every 300 feet or so. Downtown Loomis, where we are here, plenty of hydrants. As you get out in the country, there's less hydrants. That's just the way it is. But there's also places, you see a lot of ponds working down in here. There's a lot of raw water, a lot of greenery because people have ponds and irrigation water. So yeah, this is just a completely different situation in Placer County than what we've seen in Southern California. It doesn't mean, as Chief said, that you can't have a big wildfire. It's just that we all work together really, really closely to make sure that this system works. And that if we do have a fire, which I said, I've experienced it, we get everybody out safely. We do our best to protect the communities, and we get the right folks on it with the right equipment. This is what we're trying to avoid. But you can see these guys are tapped into hydrants and fighting fire. This is what we need in Placer, and this is what we're here to provide. So appreciate your time tonight. I'm going to turn it over to Kevin.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. And I actually don't have the slideshow. So
Oh, yes.
you can stare right at me. How many people in here have heard of University of California Cooperative Extension? Raise your hand. I'm impressed. That's, I think, the most in any audience ever. Usually I have to say, think 4-H, and then people, oh, 4-H, yeah. So our Cooperative Extension office covers Placer and Nevada counties. Our Placer County office is up in Auburn in the DeWitt Center. Some of you may have visited before. I was the Master Gardener Program Manager in Placer County and Nevada County for 22 years. So I answered thousands of gardening questions and became an expert at plant and tree diagnosis and things like that. When I passed the baton a couple years ago, I moved into a part-time position helping people with landscape defensible space. I'm your local plant guy, okay, tree guy. And so I feel like this is a huge need because we know that CAL FIRE estimates that 80 to 90% of houses that burn down in the state of California burn down from embers, okay? So now you know that's a really important piece of information to understand, because when you have a large property and you're focused on the back 40, when the priority most likely should be right around your home, right? We have to shift consciousness to be looking around our home. So what I say in every talk is go get your measuring tape, put it out to 5 feet and walk around your house and take note of everything that's flammable in that 5-foot zone, not just plants. Could be a recycling bin full of newspaper, right? So that is by far the most important zone. And guess what? What is the history of landscaping in the state of California? Foundation plantings. Anyone ever heard of that before? 60s, 70s, 80s, we built houses. We put evergreen shrubs all around our home to disguise the foundation and give us privacy. So now we have highly flammable plants ringing our homes, and we know that 80 to 90% of homes burn down from embers that come into that area and catch things on fire. So we have to reimagine our landscapes, and it's going to be challenging because we love those shrubs all around our home, right? The most widely planted shrub in the state of California for 3 decades was the most flammable plant that we know, the juniper. Yep, I grew up with junipers all around my house, playing juniper berry wars, right? Great shrubs, guess what? Highly flammable. Cypress trees, highly flammable. Those are everywhere. Any type of conifer-like needled shrub that we like to put all around our home, now we have to get those out of there. So my focus is helping people make decisions about their landscapes for fire, okay? I am currently working a lot with Placer County Office of Emergency Services, Placer County OES. They administer something called the Firewise Community Program. How many people in here are part of a Firewise community? Ooh, I'd like to see a lot more hands than that, right? We only have 2 options in this fire situation. We either work together or we complain about each other, okay, and point fingers. So let's not do that. A Firewise community program allows you to get together with neighbors and make plan and lean on each other to get the work that's needed done. We can't do it alone. We need to work together. And when it comes to landscaping, we have to, again, completely flip the way that we have our landscapes organized. So I know that we have another speaker coming up, and I'm going to stop right there so I don't take up too much time. But I encourage you to pick up one of my cards out on the table out there. And if you're part of a Firewise community, I can come for free and help you on site with some of your landscape needs. Reach out to me via email with questions, and I can help you figure out how to choose plants, figure out how to move plants. There's a very specific horticultural technique to transplanting mature shrubs and trees. It's not just the backhoe method, okay, where some die and some live, okay? So there's a lot of more information I'd like to share with you, so please reach out if you can, and I'll hand it back over. Thank you for inviting me to come today. I don't need it.
Nope, all good. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Jack Thompson. I am a senior field representative for Congressman Kevin Kiley. So I just wanted to thank you for putting this on, and thank everyone else, of course, for putting this on. And we have such great leaders here at the local level, and they really just are dedicated to protecting our region. So we're really lucky to have that. And Congressman Kiley, he's always happy to support where he can at the federal level. He believes that the federal government needs to take a more proactive role in wildfire mitigation and bringing those high costs of wildfire mitigation projects down. So recently he introduced the Safe Home Act. So this is a bill which supports those who want to harden their homes, projects that were just talked about earlier tonight. And this bill creates a 25% refundable tax credit and caps at $25,000 for these home hardening projects. And it also has an inflation adjustment, which is equal to the cost of living adjustment. And there's also another bill which Congressman Kiley co-sponsored. It's the Fix Our Forests Act. This is a bill, it's a long bill, so among many other things, it helps expedite the review process for certain forest management projects under NEPA. And overall, it just does a great job at cutting the red tape and bringing more sensible forest management projects or policies to our forests. So this bill recently passed out of the House of Representatives on a bipartisan vote, and now it's going to be going through the Senate. So hopefully it sees the same level of support there and it gets signed into law. But again, these are just two bills that we're excited about. We're going to keep looking at other opportunities to provide support where we can to the regional level. So thank you very much.
And who doesn't want to save money on our tax dollars, right? So we want to thank your office for that. Thank you very much, everyone. We're going to open this up to questions. I do have one other thing I wanted to point out. I didn't know that your trucks could suck the water out of pools until after I bought this big, it's called, oh, the clicker. It's called a firefighter one hose, and it was on Shark Tank, and I got one.
They'll help you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. And ironically, the person who created this is in El Dorado. And she was having some procurement issues after the LA fire, but I bought one and it hooks up to your pool equipment and you use your pool water to put the fire out. So, because I have a long drive with the fence, so I'm not sure if your truck would make it down our drive. I'm going to check and make sure we make an adjustment on that right away. So anyway, it was just food for thought. Anyone that has a pool, it connects to your pool equipment, and when you drain your pool, it comes out, and it's an actual fire hose. I saw it at the Roseville Home and Garden Show. So anyway, we're going to open this up to questions. Please feel free to ask any of the panel questions. And then when we do close it off, we are going to take your questions, any questions that we haven't been able to get to. We're going to write them. We're going to have you write them down, and we'll get the answers for you. And we will send out some FAQs with all of the questions afterwards to anybody who wants them. And we're going to post this actual recording. Oh, click the button. Okay. So if anyone has questions, let me know and I will come around with, oh, here we go. It's recording. So that way the people at home can hear it. So we want you to.
Yeah, my question is, I'm in a homeowners association that has a number of at-risk, homebound, disabled, elderly people. Is there any value or opportunity to give you lists of those people? Because we probably won't be able to help all of them, even with my Firewise group.
So
You asking, oh, I'm sorry.
probably both of us.
Question
Okay.
geared to.
After you, team effort.
Those two guys.
So, so on the surface, it would seem to be helpful and it's good information. I would say what we encourage is when a 911 call is made to pass that information on to a dispatcher. The problem with list is, and especially we're dealing with people, they change. Either people move away, new people move in. If it's associated with an address, it might not be up-to-date information. So that would be my recommendation is, or maybe you designate with your Firewise community, if we have a wildfire situation that's coming towards the community and somebody's designated to call dispatch and give them that list at that time. That way that list is accurate. If we just give a blanket list and give it into dispatch, like I said, and say 4 or 5 years goes by and people pass away or they move or something like that, now that list is really valid and we may make decisions based upon that list that are inaccurate. Do you
Yeah,
have anything to
I would
add?
agree. The problem with it, like my partner over here said, that if it's an older list, we may spend time and resources trying to find somebody that doesn't live there anymore. Right?
I'd just like to follow up with thanking South Fire District for opening Station 19 with an ambulance unit. We're so thrilled in my area. Thank you.
Glad to hear that.
One thing that might help. It's Doug Miller with Betsy's Tree Care. We do this little bit of work and prevention stuff. But one thing that for the elderly folks in the room and your circles of influence, there is a grant available for defensible space work. You all have my flyer. I can get you information on that. It's up to $5,000 worth of free work.
You're on the chairs. You want to go ahead and do that real quick?
Yes, hello, Tim Monroe from your local Fire Safe Council. Anybody here that wants to become a Firewise community, come see us after. We've got information, we can help you get started. Thank you.
Any more questions? Okay. If you could stand up, if you don't mind, because in your voice.
I was wondering what is being done at Folsom Lake for debris removal. That area is really has a lot of trees and shrubs and is a fire hazard. And there's not a lot of enforcement in that area. And there's a lot of young people that go back there for fires, campfires and that kind of thing. And it's always been a bad situation. And what's being done with that area?
That area is particularly challenging because the area around Folsom Lake is actually owned by the state of California. So our South Placer Fire District will respond into that area for an emergency situation, but technically we're the responding agency, but it's not our jurisdiction. So when it comes to prevention activities, we rely on the state to do that. We do work with them. There's some areas, Hidden Lakes Estates is one in particular that backs up against a particularly vulnerable area. We've partnered with CAL FIRE, with Bureau of Reclamation, with state parks to look at that area because it is a very kind of intense area with a lot of homes, older homes right up against a particularly dangerous area. I know that CAL FIRE has gone out and done some remediation efforts out off of Horseshoe Bar Road where they've cleared some areas that are kind of over by the North Lakeshore community. They did that 2 years ago and actually did some clearing in those areas. Again, we can't take everything out, but we're reducing that fuel load so it's a little bit more manageable. With CAL FIRE's worked its way up kind of along I would say the western shore all the way up into Auburn and has done some pretty intense work on reducing the fuel load in those areas. So it's just a large area. We try to concentrate on the populated areas. And like I said, it's a little tough for us as a local jurisdiction. We try to support the communities and kind of make the state and other agencies aware of the risk that's involved there. But my enforcement, unfortunately, kind of stops at that boundary, and I have to rely on state parks and the kind of our partners to do that. So it is an area that's taken very seriously. It is a high risk zone, and they are working towards it a little bit at a time. Hope that answers your question.
I believe that Sterling Point was given permission by the to clear an area behind their subdivision.
Excellent.
Well, I do have one question too. The Vulcan vents.
Yes.
I have a house that was built in 61 and it has a 1/4 inch vents.
Mhm.
And well, I bought the fabric
Mhm.
for, to put in. Do you know if insurance? And then I thought, God, is the insurance company going to agree to this?
Right.
Do you know if they do? So I would be essentially retrofitting with that thermoplastic piece and then an 1/8 inch screen behind that.
Mhm.
Is
So that would be with insurance companies, it's on a case by case basis. Depends on who you're insured by and whether or not I can tell you that is going to produce a lot of value, whether or not your insurance company gives you any kind of reduction in your rates if you put that in.
$4.08
Oh,
a year.
wow. Incredible. You can almost buy a cup of coffee. But the value is going to be in the fact that it's going to be much safer. Having those smaller holes like that is going to be, it's going to stop an ember rather than allow it to go all the way through. So your benefits there, it sounds like you're on the right track. That's an excellent and pretty cost-effective way to do it. The Vulcan venting is a little more pricey, but it does provide several layers of protection and they're staggered. So it just makes it more difficult. Either one is a good option.
I have two questions and they're directed to Andy. I know that we've had 18 inches of rain, but to me, it feels like we haven't had that much rain. And because last year I swear I was going to build an ark. And this year it just doesn't seem like we've had a lot of rain. So that's the first question, and where our water level is compared to last year. But the second one is, if I have a piece of property and I have miner's inch, is that shut off if there's a fire? So that way it doesn't impact the fire department? How does that work if I have miner's inch?
Yeah, let me get to both of those. So we're having actually a pretty good year. We're over 100% precipitation in all our watersheds, in the South Yuba, in the Bear, and the American River. So it's actually been pretty good. It's just, we had a very dry January, let's put it that way. But we had a really good February, really decent December, and March is lining up really good. I think we're going to end up just at average everywhere. And so we're going to be fine. And even in dry years, we have plenty of water for the community. I showed you the picture of those 2 big reservoirs we own and operate. And so, but what happens is with rain is you get the blessing and the curse is when you get rain into the spring, as Chief will tell you, the grass grows taller.
Right.
And so we're always looking for the Goldilocks wet winter and then a dry spring so that you don't get too much grasses. You rarely do you get Goldilocks, but we can keep praying for it. So no, our canal system doesn't shut off. That is gravity flow of water. Our canal system is for irrigation water. We don't recommend it. People rely on that for fire protection because it is interruptible. There are situations where that water is not available on every day. You guys know we have canal outages. There's 175 miles of canal in the county that we operate for irrigation. Not every one of those miles runs every single day. So we always say, don't rely on it for fire protection. It is good because it keeps the county green. A lot of people irrigate with that water throughout the county. We try to keep that up and we don't shut those off. In fact, in the river fire in Colfax, the fire department was on our canal system drafting from it, filling trucks. And so we actually, it's quite the opposite. We try to keep it running at full tilt, especially when we have fire dangers.
Excellent.
This relates to mobile home parks or those roadways that you go back where there's 3 or 4 addresses and to be able to find them. And I understand someplace there is a light that you can put on the outside of your house that you can flip a switch or whatever, and it would flash and it would indicate exactly where the emergency was. And so if you're responding to that kind of emergency, it takes you right where it is. And the records won't, the records may not be updated. And it seems like a really great way to go, but I can't find one of those.
Well, and I have to say, and I kind of defer back to our chief back here, I've never heard of that system. That's the first I've heard of it. So I would think the first thing that would have to happen is a jurisdiction would kind of have to adopt that program. And then so that we're aware of it, because as at this point, if we see a flashing light, it's not going to mean anything to us because it's not something that we're aware of. So that would be the first part, is that we would need to kind of gather more information in. And because you brought it up, I will look into it. But we'd have to adopt it as a kind of a standard practice. And then we'd have to educate our homeowners and property owners on, this is something that's available. This is how you hook it up. This is where you hook it up. And then that could be very beneficial in providing that to us. Now, modern homes that are equipped with fire sprinklers have what's called a horn strobe on the exterior. If we have a sprinkler activation within that house, the horn strobe flashes. It's like what you see in a commercial building here. I'm not seeing it at the moment. Oh, there we go, right on the wall. So something like that on the exterior of a home. If we have a sprinkler activation, that flashes, and that works really well to bring us to the area where we've had a fire or a sprinkler. But that's good. I'll look into it, Russ.
Okay, appreciate it.
I think they have those at Sun City in Roseville. Yeah, where they're at each home. So a lot of the homes there have them. So if there's an emergency, they could trigger it, and then they know it's flashing outside. So
Take all the help we can get.
yeah, exactly. Here we go.
Hi, I was wondering if you could speak to the new fire severity ratings and the maps that just came out.
What would you like to know?
Well, if you could explain, I understand the ratings are different now, so if you could kind of speak to that. And then what your knowledge is of the immediate area of the actual ratings.
So the maps that have just come out, the state a few years ago changed the fire severity zone maps, which hadn't been updated for a decade or more, for the state responsible areas called SRA. So every area that the state's responsible for, they updated those maps. Then this year, they actually updated them for what's known as the LRA, the local response area. I can tell you that this is information that's being pushed down to fire departments and fire districts. We didn't have a lot of input into them. The state has developed these maps, and it is in the process of being adopted by agencies. We, as an agency, can't make changes to those maps. We have to kind of take what we get from the state. We can make them more restrictive, but we can't make them less restrictive. So we actually will be publishing, and we have on our website, you can go in and you can check that map and you can see if the fire severity has changed in your area. We actually have those maps at southplacerfire.org, and we will be putting together kind of an ordinance adopting that, and then we'll be notifying. There will be a time for public comment where you'll be able to, either through our website or coming to one of our board meetings, you can have a public comment on those areas. That'll be noted. But it's kind of a tough situation. Like I said, it's being pushed down on us, and we just have to kind of adapt and go along with it, just like you do. Some of it's valid and some of it's interesting. Chief, did you have anything you want to add to that?
No, I'd just say they're on our webpage. If you go to the main webpage and scroll down a little bit, you can find the map. Yeah.
So it used to be like low, medium, high.
They're now very high, and moderate. Thank you. And then in our local area, there's a small portion of the LRA that we cover that's very high, that is on the Folsom Lake area off of Douglas. There's a couple of, let me see, I'm sorry. That area is the top one. Say it again.
Hidden Lake States.
Yes, correct. What's the top?
Very high severity.
Very high. And then we have some big areas that are the middle one here in Loomis and also in the Granite Bay area.
Right now is your time to make comments. We have it open on the website, in person, or at one of our board meetings. And then we're going to go to our fire board for adoption of a resolution, probably in April or May, depending on the comments. So if you go to the, yes. Fair question. If you go to the CAL FIRE page, who has put these maps out, they're saying the insurance agencies are not using this as a tool for their rates or their coverage. So they should be separated out. That's what the page says. Again, to Chief Ngolia's point, we did not create the maps. We don't have any input into them. We can make them more, more stringent. We chose not to do so at this time. We think they're fair in their representation. They were in process much before that. Yes, ma'am. The Assembly bill was, my memory is a little fuzzy right now, but it probably came out 5-6 years ago for the release of the LRA and the update of the SRA maps. The timing was spot on, though.
Thank you, Chief.
Okay.
Hi, this question is for PCWA, and I was wondering if there are any areas where the piping is antiquated or at risk that you know about or going to be replaced?
So we're in a constant renewal and replacement program on our piping. And so there's several areas that I would say the oldest parts of our system in Colfax and in Auburn are our highest priorities right now. As you get down into like the Loomis Basin and especially in Rockland, you'll see us, if you live in Rockland, you've probably called to complain about the traffic delays because we're tearing up most of Old Rockland to replace the water mains in the streets. And when we do that work, if the size of the pipe in the street is not adequate for today's fire flows, we automatically upsize that and then replace all the meters to meet the current standards. That's what's happening in Auburn and Colfax right now. Those pipes, some of those are 90 years old and we're in replacement mode. And you get down into Loomis Basin, that's a relatively new part of our system. And especially from here towards Rockland, is even newer. And so it's some of those pipes were just defective from the manufacturer in the 70s and 80s, and that's why they're being replaced in Rockland now. But yeah, we're on top of that. And like I said, whenever we touch a pipe, we always do it with, are there going to be more people on the pipe down the road? Is the pipe adequately sized for fire flows, for new homes? And is it adequately sized for the number of hydrants we have on it?
And fellow community members, this is very difficult for me to talk about. I'm a campfire survivor, and I've lived through all this. And there's a lot of comments I have that may be taken somewhat subjectively, but I hope you can all understand objectively. I have a few notes regarding the high-low sirens and the testing, and I think you mentioned that they're only allowed to be tested during specific times. So are they battery powered? Are they tested so that they will work during?
Good question. Yes, they are. They're actually connected to our patrol car. So it's just another switch basically on our, what we call our light bar and our buttons. So they are tested.
But
yes.
How many of them are there and where are they?
So they're mobile. They're in our patrol units.
Oh, okay.
So that
That's
when we go around and
rather,
we have to, evacuation warnings or orders.
okay. Since I've been in the campfire and I got to go through hell, the sirens, we didn't have sirens, but they have sirens now and they're not great. Yes, they're battery powered, but you go through, I don't know, has anybody here been in a wildfire? Have you guys ever got to experience it or fight it? I mean, actually, there, you were in one, sir?
Are you asking me?
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
you
yeah, I live
actually-
in Forest Hill.
Okay.
My facilities are in the middle of the mosquito fire
Mosquito
2
fire,
years
yeah,
ago.
okay. So I
yeah.
assisted a lot of your community members
Yep.
down at Sierra College.
Yep.
Um,
Appreciate that.
You're welcome. But I just want our community to be safe and us to learn from the things that I went through.
And you know what? We appreciate that because what you lived through, we are all learning from it. So I have a question for Jack. You talked about a couple of initiatives that your office is working on or has worked on. Can you tell us about that $25,000 one? Is that in effect? Or, and if so, how do we go about getting that? And that is specifically for fire hardening your home, correct?
Yeah, it is for fire hardening your home. It is still going through the legislative process. So, we're hoping, of course, for support in the House of Representatives and the Senate. So we'll see where it goes, but it's something that we're actively trying to push through the process. It's on the federal level. Yeah. There you go. Yeah.
How you get things done.
Right?
All right. Any other questions? What bill number is that?
That's the exact bill number. It's called the Safe Home Act.
Okay.
Safe Home Act.
Safe Home Act. Okay. Go on Kevin Kiley's website. Yeah. Yeah. Oh. No, it's okay.
In regards to the immediate zone around your home, the 0 to 5 foot, my understanding is that for new builds, that's mandatory. Does anybody know when it or if it will become mandatory for existing homes?
Typically, codes are not retroactive, unfortunately. So when we building code and fire code renews and changes every 3 years. And from the date that fire code is, or building code is adopted, that point forward, every new project is subject to those requirements. There isn't really a provision to go retroactive to force it to happen. Obviously, all we could do is just highly recommend that take place. It's a double-edged sword. You wouldn't want to have your 1960s home all of a sudden be subjected to current codes because it would cost you a fortune to make it up to current codes. So in that aspect, it's bad. What you're describing, it would actually be a really good thing. But it's just wherever your project, whatever code your project is built under, you're subject to that code and those requirements, unless it's enacted by a local ordinance. So that is something that, that we do is we can go more restrictive than code. Our local ordinance applies. So that's something that we do look at, but we have to have pretty good justification on why we do that, especially if we're costing people money.
In your existing home,
Mhm.
that's part of your disclosures now is about your defensible space. And depending on where you are, you can either have the city or CAL FIRE come in and say, basically, whether or not you have that defensible space is there.
That's true.
I could take that one. I'm a realtor. So yeah,
All about that.
you have to fill out an extra form. And if you're on, I call it the left side of the lake or the right side of the lake. If you're in El Dorado, they have completely different forms. And they actually required the fire hardening before we did on this side. So yeah, you do have to fill out and you have to disclose all of that. Jeff, you probably have something to add to that.
It's a big
Because
deal.
you guys rule it.
There's an inspection
They run
process
it.
that's going to be part of that new mapping for the local areas. But what that does is we have a fire agency will come in, either our jurisdiction or CAL FIRE, something of that nature. We will do an assessment of the property, and a lot of it will follow the handout that's out there, which is called PRC 4291. It's out of the Public Resources Code, and that basically is the guideline for what requirements are on defensible space and keeping your home safe. and a fire agency will do that inspection, and then that that documentation will be given to the parties involved, and either the seller or the buyer will have to come to some sort of agreement on who's going to take care of those deficiencies. And they work that out between the two of them, and then it's on whosever responsibility is as part of the contract of the sale of the home. You can probably elaborate on that more, Julie, but that's kind of the way that it.
Yeah, that's well, that does happen sometimes. And you know what? Honestly, it's what's best for all parties involved. You want it to be safe. But yeah, they do fill out the form, and you do have to decide who's going to fix it, either the buyer or seller. It depends on your negotiations, but it does have to get done, and the fire marshal will have to sign off on it.
I wondered if you guys had any information on AB 3074 that was signed by the governor in February. It says all homes will have to be have the clear material and defensible space.
So yeah, I'm aware of that. And that's something that we do look at on our new builds. We work in conjunction with the building department on that. So my responsibility as fire agency on new builds tends to center around access, water supply, fire sprinklers in the home. The WUI requirements and some of the exterior requirements as far as building materials and defensible space like that actually falls on the building official. And so the building inspectors are the ones that are kind of enforcing that side. It's more of the home construction type, where I'm kind of focused more on the protection systems within the home. So should be, I don't know. I haven't looked at it specifically enough to know if it's retroactive, but typically they're not.
And this is probably for Kevin Marini, maybe. Instead of wood chips or vegetative mulch for your right up against your house for plants and bushes that you have on your foundation, what do you recommend to be used?
Well, soon you will probably have to remove those plants from around your foundation. So as what Jeff was just saying, PRC 4291 currently doesn't have the 0 to 5 ember ignition zone as law. It's coming, but it's not law yet. And so when that comes, plants around the home will likely have to be removed at some point, right? So in that case, if you didn't have plants, you don't need that organic mulch. There are some wonderful studies on the flammability of mulches. You can look, don't take my word for it, you can look it up. University of Nevada, Reno, in my opinion, has the best one. And so there are organic mulches that can be used in defensible space zones 1 and 2 when you get outside the 5-foot zone, but you use them in very specific ways. And the type of mulch you want to use is something that is generally called arborist wood chips or composted wood chips. So it's basically a material that has both live tissues from trees and dead tissues comes together. So it kind of composts down, and that material is very slow to ignite. And when it does ignite, smolders rather than puts out a big flame length. And there's been replicated research that has shown that. So you can use that type of organic mulch in your zones 1 and 2. You just have to use them in ways where there's separation so that the entire property isn't covered in mulch. Does that help? Yeah.
One more question. Write down, we'll put the questions in writing, and then I will go and vet them out, and then we'll send out FAQs to everyone that wants. There's 2 sign-up sheets. There's one for Firewise, right? Happy is that then? Okay, and that is for you to set up a Firewise group in your community, which I recommend you want to go around. And then there is another sign-up sheet that is out there, and it has your, your name and what have you. It's by in my card, and it's got a question mark on it. That's for you to write down your questions, and or put your name and your email, and we'll send you the FAQs. This is going to be posted. It's going to be posted on PCWA, and we're going to post it on the Goularte Group. I'm not sure. Are you guys going to post it? Well, we have a lot of feed, and you guys can push it out.
Okay.
So this session will be on the internet for you to see and to listen to as well. Okay.
I just want to comment.
Sure.
What I did is I used
Instead of the rock. Yep. Instead of, any mortars, where the dirt and pretty much. It's really deep smoke.
We have to be careful with using rock around native oaks. That's a huge no-no. If you have rock around native oaks, it's absorbing heat during the day and radiating the heat out all night, and it's impacting your native oak health and its longevity. So no rocks around trees in general, and especially around native oak.
Good one.
Okay. Everyone's going to go home and pull the rocks away.
To the info of the Goularte Group, and we'll send it out to the town and get the answer for you.
Is it on? Just talking into it? Perfect. So I'm just going to go up here. Sorry. So I just have more of a comment instead of a question. I wasn't planning on talking tonight. My name is Josh Tindall. I'm the field operations commander for the sheriff's office, overseeing patrol and investigations and school resource officers, all of our special teams, our air ops unit, our search and rescue, bomb squad, et cetera, et cetera. So you're in good hands with Jason here as far as the sheriff's office goes, but I just wanted to kind of leave on a positive note from the sheriff's office. A lot of good information, a lot of good dialogue, and that light is bright. A lot of good dialogue going on tonight, so appreciate everybody for coming. I just wanted to kind of reiterate, Sheriff Wayne Wu and Under Sheriff Wright is committed to your safety, to preserving your property. One of those ways that commitment is being fulfilled is through our involvement in statewide efforts. Myself, Lieutenant Ben Machado in the back there, wave there, Ben. We're part of an incident management team for CAL FIRE. It's basically there's 6 teams throughout the state, about 60 to 70 members, and we go whenever there's a major incident. So Ben and I just got back from Palisades, there for 3 weeks, working with the LA Sheriff's Department and LAPD and County Fire on evacuation, repopulation efforts. So this past summer, we've been to Butte on the Thompson Fire. We were in Ventura County, Santa Barbara County, et cetera. And every time we leave, we get a little bit of information. So that brings me to the second point, and that's the relationships that I think you see here right now. The sheriff is committed. There's 58 counties, 58 elected sheriffs. They meet quarterly. The sheriff is committed to assisting any county sheriff that needs help. And in return, he's built those relationships with those other 57 sheriff's departments as well, to not just have the sheriff's office, Placer County, but we're getting anybody else that we need help from to come help you all so we can do our job. And then lastly, just kind of getting into the weeds, if you have not signed up for Placer Alert, please, there are many different avenues for communication, watch duty, whatever it is, your community, neighborhood communication networks. But please, that Placer alert system is what we use. It's reverse 911. Instead of you calling 911, 911 is calling out to you. You can set up to 5 different addresses. So if you have another property, if you have a loved one that's in Weimar and you're in Roseville, you can set that address up along with yours. You will get notifications for that address as well. So please, 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 please sign up for that. The other thing is about cell phone coverage. 2021, July, SB 431 was passed, which basically directed the California Public Utility Commission to set up rules for mobile communication centers to establish power up to 72 hours for their towers. So that has helped public safety in our efforts to communicate out. But like Jason said earlier, when we're asking you to go, don't wait till the 72-hour kind of the thing, because it's not a guarantee that we're going to have that power, that telecommunication power to communicate our messages to evacuate and whatnot. But and last just goes to the relationships. I don't know if I've met these 2 gentlemen. I've met Jeff, but I do know Placer County Water Agency, and I do know the UC Extension. We work with the UC Extension on our AgPass program. That's basically a program that allows ranchers to get livestock out of evacuation areas. And of course, we work with PCWA on evacuation, emergency action plans for floods and fires and snow. And we get it all here in Placer County. So with that, I just really want to emphasize, please sign up for that Placer Alert, and I'll be back for questions if you have any as well. So thank you.
So I just want to thank our panel. I mean, I did this for selfish reasons, and look at what a great event that we actually had. So I want to thank each and every one of you for coming. And I also want to thank Jack. You were such a surprise. Boy, you just landed on my, I met Jack this morning at our Coffee Connect, and it was a nice treat. There are two things that are assets in your life, and that's your family and your home. Your family is number one, and your home is number two. And so I hope that you learned something today to help protect your home, which is going to protect your family. And if you have any questions, please email and we'll send it out. And thank you so much for coming, and thank you, panel.